The KF and KF Junior European Karting Championships land in Spain for the second round of a season that so far has proven to be amongst the most challenging ever and confirms record numbers with 145 participants from all parts of the world. The circuit in question is Zuera, located in the Aragon region in the province of Zaragoza, a track that many of these drivers know well for having raced here in WSK and 2 years ago even in the World Cup dedicated to classes KF2 and KF3. The rankings after the first round held at La Conca see two British drivers in command. Callum Ilott leads the provisional standings in KF in front of fellow countryman Lando Norris and the Finnish Nico Kari, with Pedro Hiltbrand in fourth place ready to play his best cards here in his homeland. In KF Junior, Inam Ahmed leads by a small margin in front of American Devlin De Francesco. Amongst the most dangerous opponents in this class is the young German Mick Jr. But now let's enjoy some of the best moments from the first round at La Conca, and after that we'll go straight back to Zuera. A day and a half is fully dedicated to free practice before the 3 sessions of qualifications to assign the pole position in KF Junior. The best drivers engage in a fierce battle on track for the top position with only a few milliseconds difference between them. The German David Beckmann on his Tony kart is the best of his group with a seemingly unbeatable time until Swedish Anton Haga on his Cosmic improves on the German by just 71 milliseconds. It is Haga's time now to seem unapproachable until Devlin De Francesco at the wheel of his Tony kart further improves on Haga by 55 milliseconds, thus claiming the new and final pole position. At the end of these qualifications, here are the impressions of the American driver.
It was really good. The team worked really hard. I knew when we came here from the testing we were going to be really fast, and it was very possible to make pole position. We were really fast no matter the track condition. I thought the track was a lot slower for qualifying, but we were still really fast.
From KF Giugno to KF, which has its drivers divided into two groups to compete for the qualifications. In the first challenge, the battle for best time sees three drivers involved at close range. The Polish Karol Batz, particularly at ease behind the wheel of his Tony kart, cuts an excellent time, the best for a few minutes, until Danish Niklas Nielsen, at the wheel of his Cosmic, improves it by 11 milliseconds. Yet the perfect lap in this group is set by Callum Eilert with his Zanardi, who mounts to the top of the group and sets the provisional pole position. Technical problems, on the other hand, have slowed down Frenchman Gabriel Aubry, who had been in the top pack in the first round held at La Conca. In the second group, British Lando Norris sets best time in front of Nico Kari and Felice Tiene, displaying the potential to be one of the stars of the weekend. At the end of the sessions, it is Callum Eilert to gain pole position, and these are his impressions.
Yeah, it was a good time. I feel that I could have gone quicker, really, but because of the track at the end of the day, it was a bit slower. So I was a bit worried for when the second session went out, if they go quicker, but fortunately, it was good for me and managed to get on pole.
If in the exciting challenge to conquer the KF Junior pole position, the American Devlin De Francesco was the fastest, in the eliminatory heats it is Swedish Anton Haga who sets the pace to win all the races in which he participates. The Swede puts on a truly impressive display of speed and determination. De Francesco claims 2 wins out of 4 races, a result that puts him in the second place of the general standings. Also worthy of note is the excellent performance that allows another American, Logan Sargent, to bring in third place, placing him amongst the potential leaders of the pre-final. Behind Logan is the German Beckmann, while right behind them, although slightly in shade up to this moment, is the young Mick Jr., who had shown good progress at La Conca. Mick wins one of the eliminatory heats. In KF qualifying, Felice Tiene had already emerged as one of the fastest, confirming this trend even in the pre-qualification heats, by winning 3 victories out of 4 races to conquer the first place overall. Behind Felice, we find Finnish Nico Kari, author of 2 wins out of 4 races. And worthy of note is the third place by Niklas Nielsen, who conquers 2 victories, with Brit Lando Norris coming in just behind him. The balance displayed in the KF ranks pre-announces 2 very interesting races for both pre-final and final. It is sufficient to think that the winner of the pole position, Callum Eilert, comes in 8th, whilst Frenchman Gabriel Aubry, who was last in qualifying due to technical problems, is able to ascend to the 11th position in the eliminatory heats, in front of Polish Karol Batz in 12th place, who was also penalised by a technical failure. Sunday morning after warm-up, the drivers are called on track for the customary greeting to the public and to receive the handshake from the authorities. This is one of the most engaging moments of the event, where the young drivers proudly line up for the fans, displaying their most professional approach for the occasion. The first pre-final is that of the KF Junior. De Francesco immediately jumps to the lead of the race, but suddenly slows down for technical problems, yielding his place to Swedish Anton Haga. Behind the speedy Swede is American Logan Sargent and Belgian Ulysse Depot, author of an impressive start from 10th position. But on first lap he collides with Mick Jr., making the latter lose precious positions. For this maneuver, the Belgian will be given a 10-second penalty. Behind Depot are the Russians Alexander Petrov and Artem Vartanyan, British Daniel Ticktum and James Pull, the driver from Singapore. In front, Haga tries to put some distance between him and his pursuers, but Logan Sargent stays on his trail, keeping up the same rhythm as the Swede. The skirmishes from the first lap cause Belgian Depot to lag behind. At the end of the first lap, he is distanced by a full second from the front duo. The challenge for victory is marked by this duel between Haga and Sargent, who remain close and at the same time unreachable for their followers, occupied with the fight for third place. On the fourth of the 9-lap race, Swedish Anton Haga changes pace and lap after lap makes up his advantage on Logan Sargent, who seems unable to fight back. Behind them, the duel for third place is amongst Daniel Ticktum and Mick Jr., aiming to assault Petrov's position. On the last lap, both succeed in overtaking Petrov, and Ticktum conquers third position, with Mick Jr. coming in fourth. Under the checkered flag, Swedish Anton Haga is the winner, and conquers the right to start in pole position in the final. Second place is for Logan Sargent in front of Daniel Ticktum and Mick Jr., who finished with a spectacular sprint which separated them by only 15 milliseconds. The drivers of KF are now lined up on the starting grid for their pre-final. The start sees Felice Etienne at the lead in front of Nicholas Nielsen, Tom Joyner, Nico Kari and Lando Norris. In the first lap, Nielsen attacks and claims the lead. We are still on the first lap when an unexpected twist changes the rankings, with Frenchman Aubry colliding with Eilert, forcing him to retire. Callum Eilert is in command of the European general standings, and this retirement will oblige him to start from the end of the grid, whilst the judges inflict on Aubry a 10 seconds penalty, which will preclude his chances to go for the podium. At the end of the first lap, out of the 12-lap race, Nicholas Nielsen is in the lead, with 0.3 of a second over Felice Etienne, who is being rapidly approached by Tom Joyner and Nico Kari. Once in the lead, Nicholas Nielsen sets a very fast pace, so much so that in just a few laps, his advantage is of over a second on his direct pursuer. Behind him, Tom Joyner and Lando Norris, who has overtaken Nico Kari, challenge Felice Etienne's second position, and in the course of the second lap are both able to overtake the Italian driver, who slips back to fourth position. The skirmishes behind enable Nicholas Nielsen to further consolidate his leadership by putting even more ground between him and his opponents. On fourth lap, Lando Norris goes for second position and with a very precise maneuver overtakes his fellow countryman Tom Joyner. Norris then aims straight for Nielsen in a bid to gain the victory of the race. The pace is high, but Nicholas Nielsen has already capitalized on his advantage and Norris is unable to close the gap. Bad news, unfortunately, for Karel Batz. Technical problems on his Tony kart relegate him back in the last positions. As the checkered flag comes down, it is Nicholas Nielsen who wins the pre-final, with an advantage of 0.3 of a second on Lando Norris. Tom Joyner comes in third position. It is 14:20 on Sunday afternoon as the drivers of the KF Junior prepare for the second round of the European Championship. Swedish Anton Haga is in pole, ready to go at the wheel of his Cosmic. The driver of the GTR team has shown his superiority all weekend and aims to claim also the final. Next to Haga is American Logan Sargent, at the wheel of a Fernando Alonso. Even Logan has been extremely quick all weekend, making any forecasts nearly impossible. Even because in second row are both very motivated drivers Daniel Ticktum with his Zanardi and German Mick Jr. on his official Tony Kart. Two Russian drivers form the third row, Artem Petrov from DR and Alexander Vartanya on Ward Racing. Devlin De Francesco's second in the general standings starts from the back, while Inam Ahmed, leader of the provisional standings, starts from 9th row. At the start, Anton Hager begins well, grabbing the lead in front of Logan Sargent, Daniel Ticktum and Mick Jr. But at the second turn, it is Brit Daniel Ticktum who gains the lead of the race, followed by the Russian Petrov, whilst Hager slips back to third position. Ticktum tries to flee ahead, with Petrov struggling to keep up and Hager trying not to lose ground from his current standing in third position. On the first lap, Ticktum leads, followed by Petrov and Hager, and the Belgian Lessons, who overtakes the American Correa. At the start of the second lap, Petrov stays in Ticktum's trail, while Hager puts the pressure on from behind. In the last few turns before the end of the second lap, Petrov attacks Ticktum, who closes him, whilst Hager on the next bend finds an opening and overtakes Petrov to grab the second position. The third lap starts with Ticktum having just a few yards advantage on Hager, who, having overtaken Petrov, now has to deal with the Russians' counter-attack. Halfway through the third lap, Hager moves in like a laser on Ticktum, and a few turns from the conclusion of the lap, launches the winning move that puts him in the lead of the race. Once in front, Hager is determined to flee, but this is not to be. Ticktum, Petrov and Lessenes lined up in single file in his trail, ready to spark off the battle for the podium. The first to pass is Belgian Lessenes, who jumps in front of Petrov for third place, whilst Ticktum attempts the attack on first position, but without initially succeeding. The heat is on. Hager struggles to maintain command, whilst behind, Petrov manages to overtake Lessenes, reclaiming the third position. At the start of the fifth of the 15-lap race, Hager commits a mistake and is overtaken by Ticktum, Petrov and Mick Jr., who conquers second position by overtaking the Russian driver. Hager slips back into fifth position and starts a tricky comeback. Within the same lap, he overtakes Lessons, and at the start of the successive lap is able to overtake Petrov for the third position, just as Mick Jr. is attacking Ticktum for first place. In the meanwhile, in the back, we see a splendid comeback from the two drivers who had started from the rear, American Devlin De Francesco and British Inam Ahmed. The two, lap after lap, are now in the first 10 positions and are moving closer to the pack at the front. It is still Daniel Ticktum and Mick Jr. who are competing for the first place in the final, with Hager behind in a forceful rebound to regain the half a second which separates him from the lead of the race. At the start of the 8th lap, a brilliant overtake puts Mick Jr. in the lead and forces Daniel Ticktum behind. This maneuver allows the duo formed by Hager and Petrov to close in on the front runners and to keep fighting for the first positions. In the final part of the 8th lap, Hager attacks Ticktum, gaining second position and putting himself on the trail of Mick Jr., who in turn takes advantage of the situation to gain a few extra yards. At the start of the 9th lap, Ticktum is overtaken also by Petrov, who reclaims third position, whilst Hager has nearly managed to get into Mick Jr.'s trail. In the same lap, Ticktum replies to Petrov by regaining the third position, whilst Hager seems ready for the overtake which is worth the lead, a move which comes at the start of the 10th lap. Mick is overtaken but fights back by flanking the Swedish driver, who inadvertently touches him and sends out an apology. The final part of the race is spellbinding, with at least 5 drivers who could potentially climb onto the podium. Hager, Mick Jr., Ticktum, Petrov and Ahmed, author of a fabulous comeback. In the 12th lap, Mick Jr. is overtaken twice by Ticktum and Lessons, who claim second and third place behind Hager in flight up front. In the 13th lap, Inam Ahmed successfully attacks Mick Jr., gaining 4th place, whilst up front only 2 have remained in the fight for victory: Lessons, who has passed Tictum, and Anton Hager. In the last lap, Lessons attacks Hager, who defends his place, whilst Lessons is reached by his pursuers and is overtaken by Tictum. Behind, Mick Jr. flanks Lessons in a bid to overtake him, and the two collide and end off track, granting Hager a straightforward but well-deserved victory. Daniel Tictum comes in with a deserved 2nd place in front of Inam Ahmed, 3rd after having regained all of 15 positions. On the podium, Inam Ahmed and Tictum, authors of a great race, participate in the celebrations, whilst the national Swedish anthem plays in honour of the winner, Anton Hager.
Being presented to the winning team rep, Mr. Tamo.
It was hard, but I had a great weekend. I won all my heats and the pre-final and final, so it cannot be better. Yeah, the next race is in Sweden, and I'm from Sweden, and it's a good track for me.
At 15:15 in the afternoon, the drivers of the KF are summoned on the track for the 2nd final of the season. Nicholas Nielsen is in 1st row, having succeeded in placing his Cosmic in pole position. The Danish driver's only purpose is to aim for victory. Next to Nielsen is another contender to the title, Lando Norris. The British driver has repeatedly shown his determination to win and is ready for battle. In 2nd row is Tom Joyner at the wheel of a Zanardi, flanked by Nico Kari on a Tony Kart. In 3rd row, Felice Tiene will also aim for the podium with his CRG, and next to him, Dutch Matti van Leeuwen on a Zanardi shares the same objective. At the start, Nielsen makes no mistakes and gains lead of the race, followed by Lando Norris, Tom Joyner and Nico Kari. On the 2nd turn, the leading pack opens up and Felice Tiene takes advantage, gaining 2nd place behind Nielsen. In the meantime, Nico Kari gets on Felice Tiene's trail and 3 turns before the pits overtakes him, gaining 2nd position. Thus ends the first of the 18 laps of the final, with Niklas Nielsen in command with just a handful of yards on Kari, Tiene, Joyner and Russian Nikita Mazepin. In 2nd lap, the positions remained unchanged, but Kari is stalking Nielsen, whilst Joyner marks Tiene. A double pass comes in the 3rd lap at the same turn. Nico Kari overtakes Niklas Nielsen, whilst Tom Joyner conquers 3rd place over Felice Tiene. Thanks to this double move, the advantages between competitors close and the pack of drivers stays compact, followed at a short distance by Lando Norris. At the start of the 3rd lap, we witness Tom Joyner's attack on Niklas Nielsen, who loses both 2nd position and concentration, allowing Felice Tiene to take advantage of the situation and bring his CRG to 3rd place. 2 bends ahead, and it is Niklas Nielsen to be overtaken by Lando Norris, relegating him to 5th position. In the meantime, up front, Tom Joyner tries to close in on Nico Kari to attempt the attack on 1st position. In the next lap, Lando Norris shines again with a remarkable pass on Felice Tiene, who is forced to grant him the 3rd position. On a turn of the 8th lap, Tom Joyner passes Nico Kari and gains lead of the race, whilst Kari is left to defend himself from the gritty attacks of Lando Norris and Felice Tiene. Niklas Nielsen now attacks Felice, who is forced to leave even his 4th position to the Danish driver. Tiene loses pace and 2 turns ahead is overtaken also by Alessio Lorandi, who has caught up with the front pack thanks to a tremendous comeback. The 10th lap sees a perfect pass by Lando Norris on Nico Kari, bringing the British driver in 2nd position behind his fellow countryman Tom Joyner. On 11th lap, Nielsen heats up the battle with a double pass on Nico Kari and Lando Norris, now claiming the Brits' 2nd place. In the meantime, Tom Joyner takes advantage of the scuffle at his shoulders to gain extra precious tenths of a second. In just 2 laps, he's able to gain an advantage of nearly 2 seconds. In the battle for second place, it is now Lorandi who takes a leading role, conquering 4th position in front of Nico Cari. Now even Lando Norris seems in reach for the Italian driver, and in the next round Lorandi overtakes him, conquering the 3rd position behind Nicholas Nielsen and Tom Joyner in flight up ahead. In the meantime, notably missing from the top positions is Callum Ilott. The British driver with high ranking in the general standings is situated around the 20th place. An outstanding comeback is seen by Polish Karol Batz, who started from the back and gains all of 22 positions, succeeding in entering the top 10. In the last few laps, Tom Joyner still owns the lead of the race, whilst behind him the battle for second place is still on. A challenge which now sees also Alessio Lorandi amongst the contestants, whom after having overtaken Lando Norris is now on the heels of Nicholas Nielsen. Under the checkered flag, Tom Joyner wins the 2nd round of the European Championship, in front of respectively Nicholas Nielsen and Alessio Lorandi. On the podium, the satisfaction of all is visible, from Alessio Lorandi, who suffered various technical problems, to Tom Joyner, who earns a well-deserved victory.
Sparkling, bubbling water time very shortly.
Out of the weekend quite fast, but I thought we've had a bit of maybe top 5 we can finish, but as the weekend carried on we got faster and faster, kept on working away, team working hard with the chassis and the engine tunes with the engine, so today we found a little something. We put the new tyres, it suited us a lot better as well, and the start of the race had a little bit of a difficult start, dropped back a few places, but just managed to stay with Nico Cari and then made the move when I saw the others quite close, and luckily there was a bit of fighting, overtaking, and I managed to pull a big lead and just stay calm and just win the race really, so it's a good result.
At the end of the 2nd round of the European KF and KF Junior Championships, the general standings are: in KF, Danish Nicholas Nielsen and British Lando Norris lead together with 44 points each. In 3rd place is Finnish Nico Cari with 42 points. In KF Junior, it is British Inam Ahmed to hold 1st position with 47 points, just one more than American Devlin De Francesco at 46 points. 3rd place is for Swedish Anton Haga with 40 points. The European Karting Championship moves to the Belgian track of Genk on the 15th of June for the 3rd round of the KF and the 1st race for KZ and KZ2.
Russia.